Almost time. Hold together a little longer. What is that? No one comes here. The shore is sealed. You're trespassing.
I know.
This coast was sealed by royal decree.
I wrote the decree, now you see.
The storm was coming fast. Dark clouds rolled over North Point like a wall of smoke. The wind howled around the lighthouse, slipping through cracks in the stone and whistling down the narrow stairwell. The sea below the cliffs had turned gray and heavy, the color of dull metal. Waves crashed hard against the rocks, sending white spray high into the air. Petra climbed the iron stairs with steady steps. A jar of lamp oil was tucked under her arm. She had climbed these stairs every evening for 6 years. The rhythm of her boots hitting metal never changed. No matter the weather. No matter how lonely the shore felt. The lamp had to be lit. She was halfway up when lightning flashed across the horizon. The light filled the narrow window beside her for a split second. She paused and looked out. At first she thought it was driftwood. Then she saw it clearly. A small rowboat was cutting through the waves, heading straight toward her shore. Her shore. The forbidden shore. 4 years ago, the Alpha King had sealed North Point by royal decree. After the territory wars ended, the cliffs were declared too dangerous. No one was allowed to settle there. No one was allowed to visit. The coast belonged to silence. And to Petra. Every wolf in the kingdom knew the law. No one came here. But someone was. She pressed her hand against the cold glass and squinted through the rain. The boat came closer with every wave. One man sat inside it. He rowed without panic. His strokes were strong and even. The storm did not seem to frighten him. It was as if he was not fighting the sea, only moving through it. There was no escort ship. No royal flag. No lantern. Just one man rowing alone into a storm toward a sealed shore. Petra should have turned away. She should have climbed the rest of the stairs and lit the lamp. That was her duty. The sea would deal with fools who challenged it. But her hands were already lowering the oil jar. Her feet were already turning back down the stairs. She told herself it was practical. If the boat crashed against the rocks, the wreckage would block the tide channel she used each month. That was all. The wind hit her hard when she opened the lighthouse door. It pushed against her like a living thing. Salt spray stung her face. She tightened her coat and made her way down the narrow cliff path. By the time she reached the black sand at the base of the cliffs, the boat was close enough for her to see the man clearly. He was tall. Even seated, his broad shoulders were obvious. His sleeves were pushed back, showing strong forearms that moved with controlled power. His hands wrapped around the oars as if they belonged there. His hair was black and long enough to reach his shoulders, tied back at the neck, though loose strands whipped across his face. His jaw was tight. His eyes were fixed on the shore. On her. The boat scraped against the sand. He stepped out smoothly and pulled it farther up the beach before the tide could drag it away. Rain began to fall harder. You're trespassing, Petra said. Her voice was steady, though her heart was not. This shore is sealed by royal decree. Turn around. The man looked at her calmly. Rain ran down his face, but he did not wipe it away. I know what the decree says, he replied in a low voice. I wrote it. The word struck her like a blow. Lightning split the sky behind him. For a second, bright white light revealed the mark on his belt, a wolf and a crown intertwined. Petra's breath caught. Theodore Whitmore. The Alpha King of the Western Reach. The king who had sealed this coast. You, she whispered, stepping back. Shock mixed with anger in her chest. You can't be here. And yet he stood there, rain pouring over him, unmoving. Here I am, he said simply. Why? She demanded. Why come here? The wind screamed between the cliffs. Waves slammed against stone. The storm was almost upon them. He glanced up toward the lighthouse. The lamp, he said. You need to light it before the storm hits. I know that, she snapped. I've been lighting it every night for 6 years. Then we should go up, he answered. You can decide what to do with me after. She stared at him. Every instinct told her to send him away. To order him back into his boat and into the storm. He had drawn a line around her life with one signature. He had sealed her into silence. But the storm was growing worse. And she would not let a man drown on her shore, no matter who he was. Follow me, she said sharply. And stay out of my way. She turned and climbed the path. She did not look back, but she could hear his footsteps behind her, slow, steady, unafraid. The lighthouse door closed behind them, shutting out the wind for a moment. The storm howled outside as Petra grabbed the oil jar and climbed the stairs again, faster this time. Behind her, Theodore Whitmore followed. Above them, thunder rolled across the sky. And between them hung something heavier than the storm, anger not yet spoken, questions not yet answered, and the undeniable truth that the king who had sealed her away now stood inside her lighthouse while the sea raged outside. The storm roared around the lighthouse as Petra climbed the final steps to the lamp room. Rain struck the glass panels in sharp bursts. Thunder rolled over the cliffs like heavy stones tumbling down a hill. She moved with practiced focus, ignoring the man behind her. She had work to do. Petra set the oil jar on the narrow shelf beside the great lens. She filled the reservoir carefully, her hand steady despite the storm outside. She trimmed the wick with the small knife she always kept in her coat pocket. Then she struck the flint. The flame caught at once. It always did. The lamp began to glow, soft at first, then stronger as the massive lens started to turn. A wide beam of golden light cut through the dark sky, sweeping over the raging sea in slow, steady circles. Petra stepped back and watched the light move across the water. Ships would see it. They would steer clear of the rocks. The storm would not claim them tonight. "You do this alone," Theodore said quietly from the doorway. She did not turn to look at him. "Every night." "For how long?" She faced him then. The lamp light washed over his features in warm gold and shadow. His wet hair clung to his neck. Rain still dripped from the edges of his coat. 6 years, she said. The number hung in the air between them. He absorbed it without speaking. The storm outside seemed to grow louder. 6 years, he repeated. Yes. She crossed her arms over her chest. Now tell me something. If the coast was sealed for safety, why was it never reopened? His jaw tightened slightly. The mines were cleared 2 years ago, he said. The last of the unexploded charges were removed. She held his gaze. The smuggling routes ended before that, he continued. There was no reason for criminals to use these cliffs anymore. Then why, she asked, her voice low but sharp, was the decree never lifted? For a moment he did not answer. The lamp turned slowly above them. Gold light swept across the walls, then across his face. In that moving light she saw something change in his expression. Not pride. Not authority. Something smaller. I forgot, he said quietly. The words hit harder than thunder. Petra stared at him, certain she had misheard. I forgot someone was still living here, he went on. I forgot the keeper. The air seemed to thin around her. 6 years of wind and salt and silence pressed against her ribs. 6 winters alone. 6 summers watching ships pass in the distance without ever knowing her name. Forgotten. She turned away from him quickly, pretending to adjust the wick though it did not need adjusting. Her throat felt tight. You forgot, she repeated, her voice flat. He stepped closer but not too close. I review reports constantly, he said. War damage. Rebuilding. Trade routes. Council disputes. The decree remained on the list as protection. It was marked active. It was never challenged. No one requested access. She let out a short, humorless breath. Of course not. No one was allowed to. I discovered your existence 3 months ago, he continued. A harbor master mentioned a keeper still manning North Point. I asked how long. He said 6 years. She closed her eyes briefly. I asked why no one had checked on the keeper, he said. He told me the shore was sealed. No one goes in. No one comes out. Silence fell between them except for the steady turning of the lamp. I came alone, he said. I did not bring soldiers. I did not bring banners. I did not want to arrive as a king giving orders. I came because I needed to apologize. She faced him again. Apologize, she repeated. Yes. The storm rattled the glass panes. I signed a decree meant to protect a coastline, he said. Instead, I sealed a woman inside it. His voice did not rise. It did not tremble. But it carried weight. I should have come sooner, he finished. Petra studied him carefully. The authority was still there in his posture, in the way he stood. But beneath it she could see something else. Regret. That did not erase the past. I am not forgiving you tonight, she said firmly. He nodded once. I understand. The tension between them shifted, not easing, but settling into something fragile and sharp. You're soaked, she said after a moment. There's a stove downstairs. He did not smile. Thank you. She moved past him toward the stairs without waiting. He followed at a respectful distance. The keeper's quarters were small and warm. A narrow cot stood against one wall. A desk crowded with tide charts filled another corner. The iron stove glowed with steady heat. Petra poured water into a kettle and set it over the flame. Neither of them spoke while it heated. The silence felt heavy but not hostile. She poured the tea into 2 chipped cups and handed one to him. He wrapped his hands around it. Steam rose between them. "I did not come to demand anything," he said quietly. "I came because I was wrong." She sat opposite him, leaving clear space between their chairs. "I hear your apology," she said. "That does not mean I accept it. That is fair." They drank in silence. Outside, the storm continued to rage against the cliffs. Inside, the lamp above them burned steady and faithful. And between them sat the truth of 6 forgotten years, fragile and unresolved, resting in the quiet space between 2 cups of bitter tea. The storm had not yet passed, but the worst of the wind had shifted. The lighthouse walls no longer shook with every gust. Downstairs, the stove burned steadily, throwing orange light across the small keeper's quarters. Petra sat on one side of the stove. Theodore sat on the other. The distance between them was not large, but it felt carefully measured. The silence from earlier had softened. Not gone, just less sharp. He held his cup in both hands, staring into the steam for a moment before speaking. "The Eastern Bridge was destroyed during the last push of the war," he said. "The river cut the territory in half. Trade stopped. Food shortages followed." Petra glanced at him but said nothing. "The engineers said it would take 2 years to rebuild," he continued. "They said winter would make it impossible. So I worked beside them. Carried stone. Set beams. It was rebuilt before the first snow." She watched the firelight flicker across his face. He did not sound proud. He sounded tired. "You built it yourself?" she asked. "With them," he corrected quietly. The answer surprised her. She shifted slightly in her chair. "Every autumn," she said after a moment, "a pod of whales passes this coast." He looked up. "They breach just past the southern rocks," she continued. "You can hear them before you see them. The water moves differently when they are near." His attention sharpened. "I climbed to the lamp room and watched them," she said. "They move like they own the sea." He listened without interruption. "And the tide pools," she added. "At low tide, the rocks fill with sea stars. Bright orange. And anemones that close when you touch them. Tiny crabs that look like they're made of glass." A faint crease formed between his brows. "You've studied them." She shrugged. "There was time." "How long have you been recording it?" She hesitated. 6 years, she admitted. Water temperatures. Migration patterns. Erosion rates. Storm cycles. I wrote down everything. His eyes widened slightly. "You kept records?" She gestured toward the desk buried under tide charts. "Stacks of them." He leaned forward, interest clear now. "The Royal Maritime Council has tried mapping the northern ecosystem for years. They have ships and scholars." "And," she asked, "they have less than you." The words landed gently, but they carried weight. She blinked. "You stayed in one place," he continued. "You observed consistently. That is rare. That is valuable. Valuable." No one had ever used that word about her work before. She felt something shift inside her chest. Not pain. Not anger. Something warmer. Something almost fragile. For 6 years she had kept the light burning. For 6 years she had written in silence. Not once had she imagined anyone would care. "You built more than a light," he said quietly. "You built an archive." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. The fire popped softly between them. The air in the room seemed different now. Thicker. Charged. She became aware of a strange hum beneath her ribs. A deep, steady vibration she could not explain. It was not uncomfortable. But it was impossible to ignore. She looked up. He was watching her with the same intensity. "You feel it?" he said. She did not pretend confusion. "Yes." "When the harbor master spoke your name," he continued slowly, "something struck here." He pressed his hand over his chest. Like a wave against stone. Her breath caught. The hum inside her grew stronger. "Resonance," she whispered. He stilled. "That is what your kind calls it." She nodded slowly. "The rarest bond. Not a thread. Not a pull. A frequency. 2 wolves that vibrate at the same pitch." The firelight flickered across his eyes. They seemed brighter now. "It cannot be forced," she said. "And it cannot be ignored." Silence fell again, but it was no longer empty. The hum between them deepened. It felt as if the storm outside had moved into the room, but instead of wind and rain, it was something steady and powerful. She stood abruptly, needing distance. "I am not leaving the lighthouse," she said firmly. "If that is what this means, you are mistaken." His expression did not harden. It did not retreat. "I did not come to take you away," he replied. I came because I was drawn here. She folded her arms tightly. I will not trade this place for a palace. I will not stand in a throne room and forget the sea. You won't have to. The certainty in his voice startled her. I am willing to come to you, he said. Not the other way around. The words hung between them. She searched his face for deception, for pride, for command. She found none. Only something steady. Something chosen. The hum inside her chest eased slightly, settling into a deep, constant rhythm. It did not vanish. It simply became part of the air she breathed. The storm outside continued, but inside the lighthouse something else had begun. Not forgiveness. Not surrender. But connection. And neither of them could pretend it was not there. The storm did not pass quickly. For 3 long hours, wind battered the cliffs and rain struck the lighthouse windows in steady sheets. Thunder rolled across the sea without pause. The tower stood firm, but the world outside it seemed wild and without control. Inside, the stove burned low and steady. Petra added another piece of driftwood to the fire. Sparks rose and faded. Theodore sat across from her, his coat now dry, his posture relaxed but not careless. The air between them felt charged but no longer sharp. They had stopped circling the hard truths. Now they were simply talking. I have been divided for years, he said quietly, staring into the fire. After the war, the kingdom was broken in places no one could see at first. Petra listened. There were disputes over land. Old grudges between packs. Trade routes destroyed. Families displaced. He exhaled slowly. Every decision I made satisfied one group and angered another. That is leadership, she said. It is, he agreed. But it also means something else. She tilted her head slightly. It means giving pieces of yourself away, he said. Every council meeting. Every alliance. Every compromise. I have given something to everyone. The firelight reflected in his eyes. And not once, he continued, his voice lower now, has anyone looked at me without expectation. Petra held his gaze. They see the crown, he said. They see authority, responsibility, power. But no one sees just a man. The words did not sound bitter. They sounded tired. She understood that tone. For 6 years, she said quietly, no one saw me at all. The room fell silent. The storm outside crashed against the cliffs like a living thing. She looked down at her hands, rough from salt and rope and stone. When the last keeper died, she began, her voice steady but soft, I was 17. He watched her carefully. My pack had dissolved, she said. Border disputes. Land taken. Families scattered. We were divided and absorbed into stronger territories. She swallowed. There was nothing left for me there. The fire popped gently. The lighthouse needed someone, she continued. The previous keeper's lungs had failed. No one else wanted the position. It was isolated. Art. Dangerous. She let out a quiet breath. It was the first thing that needed me. The admission hung between them. For the first time, she said, something would fail if I did not show up. Theodore's jaw tightened slightly. So I climbed the stairs, she finished. And I stayed. Rain hammered the glass again. I chose this, she said firmly. Not because it was easy. Not because it was safe. But because it was mine. He nodded slowly. I understand that more than you think, he said. She looked up. When the crown passed to me, he continued, I did not ask for it either. It simply arrived. And everything changed. The resonance between them deepened, not sharp or explosive, but steady and strong. I have spent years being what everyone required, he said. Strong. Decisive. Unmovable. And you are, she replied. But I am also tired, he admitted. And I did not realize how tired until I stood on your beach and you told me to turn around. Despite herself, Petra almost smiled. You looked at me, he said, as if I were simply a man standing where he did not belong. You were, she said. He let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. The storm's rage began to soften. The thunder rolled farther away now. The rain lightened into a steady fall. The fire burned low and warm. Petra shifted in her chair, the space between them suddenly feeling unnecessary. She moved her chair slightly closer. Not touching. But close enough that she could feel the warmth from his arm. The resonance surged gently, like waves rising and falling in rhythm. You are not just a man, she said after a moment. You are a king. That will not change. I know, he replied. And I am not just a keeper, she added. This place is part of me. I know that too. Their shoulders almost brushed now. The air between them felt thick, alive. The walls that had stood rigid and firm between them since the beach had begun to crack. Not shattered. Not gone. But opened enough for something honest to pass through. The storm outside faded into distant rain. Inside the lighthouse, two figures sat side by side, not as ruler and subject, not as decree and keeper, but as two wolves who had survived long years of duty and isolation. The resonance hummed steadily in their chests. Vulnerability lay exposed. And neither of them looked away. By the time the storm began to fade, the sky had turned a softer shade of gray. The rain slowed to a thin mist. The wind no longer howled through the cracks in the lighthouse walls. Instead, it moved in long, tired breaths over the sea. The world outside felt washed clean, as if the night had torn something open and then sealed it again. Petra rose from her chair without a word. "It's nearly dawn," she said quietly. She climbed the narrow stairs to the lamp room. The steps felt different this time. Not heavier. Not lighter. Just aware. Behind her, Theodore followed. His footsteps were steady, not rushed, not hesitant. When she stepped into the glass-walled chamber at the top of the tower, the sky beyond the panes was pale and growing brighter. The storm clouds were breaking apart, revealing streaks of soft gold along the horizon. The lamp still burned, but the flame had lowered. Petra moved toward it out of habit. Checking the lamp at dawn was something her body did without thought. She reached for the brass wick adjuster. At the same moment, his hand reached for it too. Their fingers touched. The world seemed to stop. The resonance that had been humming quietly all night exploded through her like lightning. It was not pain. It was not fear. It was immense. It surged from her chest outward, filling her limbs, her lungs, her thoughts. It felt like the ocean itself rising through her bones, powerful and endless. Her breath caught sharply. She gasped. His hand tightened gently around hers, steadying her. "Petra," he said softly. His voice sounded different now. Rough. Almost broken. She looked up. His amber eyes were inches from hers, bright in the growing light. There was no command in them. No claim. Only awe. The resonance did not fade. It deepened. Her heart pounded hard against her ribs. She could feel his warmth through the thin space between them. Feel the tremor in his breath. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his free hand and rested it against her jaw. His touch was careful. Respectful. He gave her time to pull away. She did not. He leaned forward and kissed her. It was not sudden. Not forceful. It was slow, almost uncertain at first, as if he were asking permission without words. His lips were warm despite the cold air. The gentleness of it stunned her more than anything else. Something inside her that had been locked for years cracked open. She kissed him back. Not gently. Fiercely. Her hand twisted into the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. The resonance between them shifted from a surge into a song, steady, strong, undeniable. The first light of sunrise broke over the horizon. Golden rays poured through the glass panels and flooded the lamp room. The light caught in his hair, in her braid, in the brass of the lamp. Everything glowed. They pulled apart slowly, breathless. Her forehead rested against his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I'm still angry with you," she whispered. The words were not sharp this time. They were honest. "I know," he replied. He did not try to argue. He did not defend himself. "I won't take you from this place," he continued quietly. "I will not ask you to leave the lighthouse." Her grip on his shirt loosened slightly. "This is your home," he said. "It shaped you. It kept you standing when nothing else did." She searched his face for any sign of persuasion or manipulation. There was none. "I will come to you," he said. "As often as the tide allows. And even when it doesn't." The sunrise brightened the room further, warm and clear. "You choose this?" she asked softly. "I choose you," he answered. "As you are." The simplicity of it hit her harder than any grand promise could have. No throne. No ceremony. No demand. Just choice. The resonance settled into something steady and deep, like coals glowing in a hearth. Not explosive now. Not overwhelming. Constant. She stepped back slightly, though she did not release his hand. "You can stay until the tide turns," she said. It was not surrender. It was allowance. A beginning measured carefully. A faint smile touched his mouth. Not triumphant. Relieved. "That is enough," he said. Outside, the sea moved calmly against the rocks. The storm had passed. Inside the lighthouse, the lamp burned low as daylight took its place. Two figures stood in the center of the tower, not bound by decree or crown, not joined by politics or power. But by something older. Something chosen. And as the sun climbed higher over North Point, the bond between them held, not as a claim of ownership, but as a quiet promise between two souls who had found each other in the middle of a storm. 3 months later, North Point no longer felt like the edge of the world. The decree was officially lifted at the start of the new season. The seal that had kept the coast closed for 4 years was struck from the records and rewritten. North Point was no longer forbidden territory. It was declared protected land under the direct stewardship of its keeper, under Petra. The change did not arrive with noise or celebration. It arrived with ships. The first supply vessel appeared on a clear morning, moving carefully through newly marked waters. The harbor channel had been cleared of hidden rock and debris. Signal posts had been placed along the safer approach. For the first time in years, the shore was not a place of isolation. It was a place of guarded access. Petra stood at the cliff edge as workers unloaded crates of flour, tea, oil, tools, and timber. She did not hover, but she watched closely. Every item was checked. Every instruction was clear. She had spent 6 years running the lighthouse alone. She knew exactly what was needed and what was not. Theodore did not interfere. He stood beside her, coat unbuttoned in the mild breeze, listening as she gave directions to the masons and sailors. When questions arose about the angle of the new dock supports, he looked to her first. "This is your coast," he said simply. The masons began work on a small stone cottage at the base of the cliffs, just beside the lighthouse. Not grand. Not ornate. Strong walls. 2 rooms. A proper kitchen with a wide hearth. Windows that faced the sea. Petra oversaw every detail. She argued about the chimney design until it was built her way. She selected the placement of the door so it would block the worst of the winter wind. She insisted the windows be wide enough to let in the morning light. Theodore listened more than he spoke. When supplies arrived late due to shifting tides, she reorganized schedules without complaint. When workers underestimated the cliff winds, she corrected them firmly. There was no hesitation in her voice anymore. The lighthouse still stood as it always had, tall and watchful. The lamp still burned every night. But the air around it had changed. It no longer felt forgotten. Letters began traveling between North Point and the capital. Short at first. Practical updates. Supply requests. Weather reports. Then longer ones. Observations about sea patterns. News about council meetings. Quiet thoughts written late at night when the lamp had already been lit. Theodore's handwriting was steady. Direct. Petra's letters were precise but gradually warmer. He continued visiting by boat whenever the tides were calm enough to allow it. Sometimes he arrived without warning, rowing alone across steady water. Other times he sent word ahead, choosing a day when the wind would be mild. He did not always stay long. Sometimes he remained only until sunset. Sometimes through the night. When advisors suggested he travel by carriage along the newly cleared road, he shook his head. "The boat is faster," he would say. But Petra knew that was not the reason. The rowboat had become something personal. A reminder of how they had met. Not as king and keeper. Just as 2 figures on a storm-washed shore. Their relationship did not rush forward. There were no grand announcements. No public declarations. They walked the cliffs together. They reviewed her coastal records side by side. He asked questions about tide patterns. She asked about reconstruction in distant territories. When disagreements arose, they spoke them plainly. When silence settled between them, it felt comfortable. The resonance that had once surged like a storm now rested steady and constant. It did not overwhelm. It anchored. On the evening the cottage was completed, Petra stood in its doorway and watched the sun sink into the sea. The windows caught the light exactly as she had planned. Theodore joined her quietly. "This was done well," he said. "Yes," she replied. Not pride. Not possession. Just satisfaction. North Point was no longer sealed. It was no longer forgotten. It was protected. Supplied. See. And in the quiet space between lighthouse and cottage, between sea and stone, something lasting had taken root. Not built on decree. Not built on apology. But on choice. Steady. Growing. Strong enough to outlast storms. The morning was clear and bright. The storm season had passed, leaving the sea calm and wide beneath a pale blue sky. Sunlight spilled across the cliffs of North Point and turned the water into a sheet of silver. The lighthouse stood tall against the horizon, quiet now in daylight, its work done until night returned. Petra stepped out of the stone cottage with a cup of tea in her hand. The air smelled of salt and warmth. Gulls circled lazily overhead. The tide was steady, neither rising nor falling too quickly. She looked out across the water. And she saw it. A single rowboat cutting cleanly through the calm sea. Her heart shifted in her chest before her mind caught up. She knew that shape, knew the rhythm of those strokes. He could have arrived by carriage. The road from the capital had been cleared months ago. It would have been easier, faster, safer. But he was rowing, alone. The boat moved steadily toward the shore, not hurried, not dramatic, just certain. Petra set her cup down and walked toward the cliff path without rushing. She did not need to. He always reached the shore. The boat scraped softly against the sand. Theodore stood, pulled it higher up the beach with one strong motion, and secured it against the tide. He wore simple clothes. No formal jacket. No sign of ceremony. A canvas sack hung over one shoulder. When he looked up and saw her walking down the path, his expression changed. Not surprise. Not relief. Something quieter. Something chosen. She met him halfway down the cliff. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair back from her face. His touch was gentle but sure. Then he kissed her. Not urgently. Not as if he feared losing her. He kissed her slowly, deeply, as though it was still new every time. As though he was still discovering the shape of her mouth. She returned the kiss without hesitation. The resonance between them settled warmly in her chest, steady and constant. It no longer surged like it had that first dawn. It did not need to. It was woven into her now. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "I brought something," he said. She raised an eyebrow. He reached into the canvas sack and pulled out a small glass jar wrapped in cloth and twine. Golden liquid shimmered inside. "Honey," he said. She laughed softly. "You remembered." "I remember," he replied. It was a simple statement. But it carried weight. He had not forgotten again. Petra took the jar from him and held it up to the light. The honey glowed in the morning sun. "You rowed for this?" she asked. "I rowed because I wanted to," he said. Not because of duty. Not because of expectation. Because he chose to. Behind them the lighthouse stood tall and steady. The cottage doors were open. Smoke curled lightly from the chimney. The sea moved in its endless rhythm, waves touching the shore and pulling away again. Petra slipped her hand into his. "Come inside," she said. He followed her up the path without hesitation, carrying the rest of the sack with one hand. They did not speak of councils or territories or future announcements. They did not discuss titles or politics. Inside the cottage, the kettle already waited on the stove. The windows were open to let in the salt air. The room felt lived in, not grand. He set the supplies down carefully. She placed the honey on the small wooden table beside the window. He stepped close again, resting his forehead lightly against hers. "I will keep coming," he said quietly. "As long as the tide allows?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Even when it doesn't." She believed him. Because he had already proven it. Outside, the lighthouse cast no beam in the daylight, but it stood ready. Always ready. And the sea continued its ancient rhythm against the cliffs, steady and faithful. Their story did not end with a crown placed on her head. It did not end with a ceremony. It ended with something quieter. Every time the tide turned, a rowboat appeared on the horizon. Not escorted. Not announced. Just one man choosing the sea, choosing the climb, choosing the door she had left open. He came back. Not as a king. As hers. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.